is the first year.
Me too. It's not great. At 6 o'clock, we should get started. Welcome, everybody. This is such a new thing. Welcome to the first in person of the Sonoma County Library Commission in a long time. So we haven't gone through a real rehearsal, so if we stumble on some things, we have our attorney here, and we also have our fabulous library assistant, and we've got our new director, Eric Thibault, so we should be able to walk through this. This meeting will be live streamed and available for public observation to any person with internet access. One of our participants, Mr. Engbarth, is going to be attending the meeting via teleconference in accordance with Government Code Section 54953. And then we have a second commissioner, Commissioner Heavenridge, who is now to allow Commissioner Heavenridge to attend.
Question, please.
Yes.
Fred and Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Where is the microphone, or where are the microphones that are picking us up?
Microphones are in the
Speak
room.
up. This strip right here, see the green,
Oh, okay.
and there's another one.
All right. Thank you.
So they can hear us perfectly. We need to make sure that in order to reach everybody in this room, we speak loudly and clearly. So, can you hear back there? Yeah. Excellent. All right. But we have to be mindful of making sure that everybody in the room talks. So back to business. Would someone move to allow Commissioner Heavenridge to attend?
Move it.
Thank you, James.
Second.
Thank you. All right. And may I have all the hands in favor? Can I do hands?
You even do voice.
I do need voices. All right. Commissioner Haeuser?
Yes. Aye.
Commissioner Elkin?
Yes.
Commissioner Green, welcome, Commissioner Green. This is our first time.
Aye.
And she is from Cloverdale, so we're delighted to have her. You were going to be next, but since you've spoken already, let's see. Here we go. Okay, Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes.
Commissioner Lago.
Yes.
Commissioner Cahill.
Yes.
And Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Heavenridge.
Here.
Commissioner Engbarth.
Yes.
And it's unanimous. All right. Welcome, Paul. Let's see. We have had public comment. We have had a lot of public comment, as most of you have received emails from the last commission meeting to this commission meeting. Are there any members of the, and I don't think we have any announcements. I'd like to welcome you again for, here we are, and it is Women's History Month, and we're delighted that the library is going to be doing a lot of activities as far as that's concerned. Let's see. And did I?
Quick comment, under the Just Cause and Emergency Participation Rules, we need to ask Commissioners Engbarth and Heavenridge if there is anyone over the age of 18 in the room with them, and if there is, what their relationship to that person is.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Commissioner Heavenridge, did you hear that question?
Yes, there's no one under 18 in the room.
Commissioner Engbarth?
Yes, there's no one here, just me.
Excellent, thank you. And I don't believe I called the roll, did I?
No.
No.
All right, back to calling the roll.
Already.
It's an iterative process.
It is.
It is. All right. Commissioner Haeuser? Here. Commissioner Elkin?
Here.
Commissioner Green?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
Commissioner Cahill?
Here.
Commissioner Lago?
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie? Here. Can I make it? And I'm
And
here as well. All
your
right.
remote participants.
Ask them.
Commissioner Engbarth?
Here.
Commissioner Heavenridge?
Here.
You're right now. They're all here. Okay. Any announcements? No. Any members of the public who wish to comment? No members of the public who wish to address the commission? This is regarding matters not on the agenda. And so you can take my phone and, but I see no one here and I see no one online either. All right. Then our next item of business is item 4, an action item by resolution. This resolution affirms the rights of transgender and non-binary people. As you can see in the resolution, there's a special day this month that honors those folks. And so we want to add our support.
Move it.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Elkin, would you like to read it for us?
Thank you very much, Chair Doyle. I did reach out to Chair Doyle earlier today and ask if I could have the privilege of reading this resolution tonight. This issue is personal for me. And I also would like to just take a moment to share that last week I was very happy to be joined by Director Thibault. We made a presentation to the City Council of Healdsburg, and in discussing the upcoming refresh, Director Thibault mentioned that the Healdsburg Library will be the first in our system to have non-gendered single-person restrooms. I think this is a huge step forward. I'd like to see us continue that in other branches. Resolutions are fine, but taking concrete action that actually makes people who are transgender or non-binary feel welcome in our facilities is critically important. That said, I'd like to read this resolution affirming the rights of transgender and non-binary people. Whereas March 31 is set aside as International Transgender Day of Visibility to honor and recognize the resilience and accomplishments of the transgender community. And whereas transgender and non-binary people are valued members of society who deserve respect, safety, and equitable access to resources. And whereas discrimination against transgender and non-binary people exists, infringing upon many of the rights afforded to cisgender people, including access to medical care, housing, physical safety, the ability to obtain proper medical benefits, secure employment, and legally change gender on government documents. And whereas the Sonoma County Library is committed to its collections, programming, and staff being inclusive and welcoming, and whereas the library restates publicly to those in our community who have been hurt by transphobia, homophobia, racism, bigotry, prejudice, misogyny, misunderstanding, and hate. We see you, we hear you, we stand with you, and as we look outward to help our communities heal, we pledge to continue looking inward and to face unflinchingly the truths in our own system. Therefore, be it resolved that the Sonoma County Library Commission affirms the rights of transgender and non-binary people to be welcomed in our libraries, our neighborhoods, our communities, and our world.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well written. Well written.
Any other comments from the commission? Any public comment? And then well, actually, we're going to take a vote. But if you've got public comments, we're certainly delighted to hear them.
I wanted to thank the commission for making, I guess it hasn't been adopted yet, for introducing this statement. My name is Chelsea Kernick. I use she, her pronouns. I am the chair of the board of directors at Positive Images, which is a 33-year-old LGBTQIA center in Santa Rosa, serving Sonoma County and beyond. Today, about 65% of the people that we serve at Positive Images are transgender or more non-binary. And that extends through all ages. We serve youth and adults alike. And it is an incredibly important time in our world, in our nation, in our local communities to affirm support of transgender and non-binary people, specifically uplifting trans and non-binary people within our LGBTQIA community at a time when many political attacks, many physical attacks, and the media in so many instances do not, do threaten our community. Very recently, over 1,000 people who are contributors to the New York Times wrote a letter to the New York Times about biased coverage that misrepresents trans people and creates fear and stigma for the community. And the response from the New York Times was deeply disappointing, and I think gaslighting of those contributors, not accepting culpability for the damage that they have caused. And this is like the most important legacy publication in our country. Club Q was very recent. It happened the day before that shooting in Colorado Springs at a LGBTQ bar, a safe haven for our community. Took the lives of trans people the day before Trans Day of Remembrance. So Trans Day of Visibility, which is mentioned here, is an important day, uplifting the people who are boldly living their lives in our society. And it pains me that we have a day of remembrance as well to acknowledge that in spite of the beauty and richness that trans and non-binary people add to our lives and our world, they are still the victims of violence and have disproportionately short lifespans because of violence. In particular, this impacts trans women and in particular trans women of color. So I think this is a really valuable time for the library to be considering deeply how everything from the signs that you see when you walk through the door, to the bathrooms you're able to use, to the books in your collection, to the service that you receive, can feel welcoming to a community that has a deep history of marginalization and present day harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take the vote? And then Mr. Hawley, I believe you had some remarks as well. All right, Commissioner Haeuser.
Aye.
Mr. Elkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Green. Aye. Commissioner Parker.
Aye.
Commissioner Mayo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lotto.
Aye.
Commissioner McKenzie. Aye. And Commissioner Ingbarth.
Yes.
Commissioner Hicks.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Doyle, Commission, community. I was asked to provide some background on what the library is doing to support the transgender and non-binary community.
Could we ask speakers to speak directly into the microphone?
Is the microphone
The
on?
microphone is actually,
But there's a microphone on that.
oh, there's
Not
another.
now.
There it is.
Better?
Okay.
So as Commissioner Elkin mentioned, the library is moving towards gender-neutral restrooms, and I believe that will be included in our refreshes from now on. Positive Images, the wonderful organization that Ms. Koenig represents, presented at All Staff Day, very educational. We offer special outreach to the transgender community for community archive and other programs such as Here and Queer, Cinema Response, Right Programming. We've also talked a lot about names. When people discover who they really are, sometimes they find that their names don't fit. And so we've not only updated our technology, but our paper forms so people can use preferred names in a respectful and appropriate way. Pronouns matter. We offer staff and our community the opportunity to have pronoun pins, pronoun flags. You can use your pronouns in your email signatures. That's all recognized and supported at the library. We participated for several years in the annual Jazz and Friends National Day of School and Community Readings. That's organized by the Human Rights Campaign. And that offers special story times for trans kids and families. The Otter book that you have in front of you, Otter uses they and them pronouns. So we're putting in there, we're normalizing the use of this. Our queer book club includes titles by and about transgender people. Of course, you know we fly progressive pride flags in the branches. And this resolution itself matters, you know, as it says in the language of the resolution. And what we're learning in our DEI work is that it's important to make people who have been othered now visible. And so we see you is what we're telling people with this resolution. So I personally appreciate you supporting it. We see you. And I hope everyone who sees this understands that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have the resolution. I believe we're being asked to sign it and hand it over. Erica, this is for you to sign as well.
We're going to take a picture. Sure. You want to maybe Chelsea for that thing?
So there's 2 copies of the documents. That's okay.
In the old days, we always took pictures of resolutions of public hearings. Bringing that tradition back. Thank you. Everybody saying, we see you.
We see you.
Thank you.
Yes. And it'll be on the library's website as well. So we'll be tracking about it. All right. Now we're moving in presentations, and because we're all here in large part because of the Brown Act. So we thought that we would have our attorney talk about the Brown Act a little bit. And he's going to make a brief presentation. If you've got questions, he's delighted to answer them. So Mr. Jeff Mitchell,
Thank you. Nice to see you all in person for the first time since we were retained 2 years ago. Okay. Yeah, so it's been a while. So many things have happened. What's that? Better? Okay, I'll try speaking directly into the microphone. Okay, so I was asked to do a brief presentation on the Brown Act. My intention is to do a brief presentation, but then turn it over to questions. So I thought we would focus for tonight on teleconferencing, since that seems to be a topic that is relatively new and not entirely understood, in part thanks to the drafting of our legislature, but we'll let that one go back for the moment. So just to get the sort of set the tone for this, the Brown Act is California's open meeting law. Most states have them. They're often called sunshine laws. The idea is that the public's business needs to be taken in public, and that the times when a public body, like the commission, meets in closed session without the public present should be rare, few and far between, and only for specific circumstances. So that's kind of the general thrust of the Brown Act. The Brown Act itself contains a number of provisions related, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this, related to the content of agendas, what constitutes a meeting, where meetings can be held, when is a meeting not called a meeting. I'll talk a little bit about that. But one thing that I want to note is that the Brown Act applies to what are called legislative bodies. The commission is considered a legislative body, as are standing committees of the commission. So the finance committee being the most prominent standing committee. It also applies to your library advisory boards and to the Measure Y committee. All of those organizations need to operate in accordance with the Brown Act. So generally, as I said, the Brown Act contains rules related to how special meetings our regular meetings and special meetings are noticed and agendized. It talks about the limited circumstances when there can be a closed session, and we're going to have one tonight on real estate. Also, a piece that we want to sort of segue into the teleconferencing discussion is the Brown Act assumes that all attendance will be in person unless an exception applies. So there are some limited exceptions that allow a quorum of the board to meet outside of a regular meeting. Those are things like attending a conference that's open to the public, attending a meeting of another organization to discuss matters of local concern, attending meetings of other agencies, attending standing committee meetings. But those are, again, are very limited exceptions to the general rule that meetings be held in public and with everyone present. So that kind of gets us to remote participation and the circumstances under which remote participation is allowed. For many years, there were teleconferencing rules in the Brown Act that functioned reasonably well. They generally required 5 components. Right? The first is that you had to, if you were going to be participating remotely, the location you were participating from had to be identified in the agenda. That location had to be open for public participation. You had to post a copy of the agenda at that location. All votes had to be by roll call, and the quorum of the board had to be located within the jurisdiction, so within Sonoma County in the case of the commission. And that, as I say, those rules have been in place for many years and operated reasonably well. Then we had a pandemic. So begin with the pandemic, Governor Newsom issued an executive order that suspended a number of those provisions, essentially the provisions that required you to identify where you were participating remotely and that you make that space open to the public. Those are the most important ones that were suspended as part of his executive order. That executive order was then followed with AB 361, the legislature's response, which basically codified what the governor had done by executive order and expanded a little bit in ways to ensure public had access to meetings. Those we operated under for several years until yesterday. On yesterday, not without notice, he had told us he was going to do this back in October, the governor rescinded his state of emergency, his proclamation of emergency for COVID, which removed the underpinnings for the AB 361 teleconference rules. You needed to have a declaration of emergency in order to be able to meet under those rules. The legislature, anticipating that the governor was going to do that, passed last year AB 2449, which created a couple of new teleconferencing rules. And they are typically now known as just cause and emergency exceptions. And we have 2 examples tonight. Commissioner Engbarth is participating under the just cause exception and Commissioner Heavenridge under the emergency exception. So one thing that's important to remember, because this has been a source of some confusion over the last couple of months, the original, what I call the traditional teleconferencing rules, operate simultaneously and can operate simultaneously with the emergency and just cause rules. You can blend participation. We could have a third person on this meeting participating under the traditional rules, which would have required that their location be identified in the agenda and that that location be open to the public. The one place where there is a potential for a little bit of a conflict is under the new just cause and emergency rules. A majority of the commission has to be located in one physical location. So you could imagine a scenario where under the traditional rules, you don't have to have a majority in a location. You just have to have them within the county. You could have a scenario where people have it in advance, identified that they're going to be participating remotely under the traditional rules, but that leaves less than a quorum at one location. In that circumstance, not be able to use just cause or emergency exceptions. But other than that, the series of exceptions can all function sort of simultaneously. I'm going to pause in case there are questions on where I am so far.
Yeah, I have a question, Jeff, and apologize because I tried to read this carefully, but I couldn't quite see the answer. So let me pose the scenario. The commission is, or the finance committee is going to meet in person as per usual. I'm traveling somewhere, but not for library business. It didn't look like that would fit under either the just cause or the emergency circumstances.
Correct.
Am I allowed to join by Zoom under the, if I'm just traveling for personal reasons?
Yes, but it has to be done under the traditional rules, which means you need to notify the library in enough time so that your location can be identified on the agenda. and then you need to post a copy of the agenda at your remote location, and that location has to be open to the public. And not that anybody would join you from there, but still, it has to be open to the public.
Regardless of how far away it might be from.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Historically, the only exception I have told people is not if you're on a cruise ship and not if you're on a plane, because it's not really possible for the public to be participating there. But if you are so fortunate as to be in southern France and you want to participate in a meeting, you can, you post an agenda, and who knows, maybe somebody will come in and want to see what the Brown Act is.
Okay, sorry, I appreciate that clarification. I didn't see that in the language here, but that's good to know. Do we have, or can you provide kind of that quick written summary of what you must do in that usual situation?
Yes, I believe that is in the materials that were in the agenda packet.
It may be.
Under the traditional, so we broke it down as, there are now 3 ways to join: traditional, just cause, and emergency. So if you look at the first section, the customary teleconferencing, what I think of as traditional teleconferencing, those would be the rules.
Oh, the customary okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Haeuser?
My question relates to the definition of majority of the commission. Is that a quorum?
When the legislature chooses to use the word majority, they typically want you to use majority. So not a quorum. And the difference being that you can have a quorum under different configurations of people who are conflicted out or who are absent. So if you have, or a vacancy on the commission. I think if there was a vacancy on the commission, I would say majority is a majority of the sitting commissioners. You have somebody who is just missing from the
Okay,
meeting.
listen, to be specific, we have 10 appointed commissioners right now, 1 vacancy. What is a majority? Is that 6?
Majority is always more than half. So when you have 10, it will be 6.
A nice, specific, clear number for all of us
6.
simple people.
There, 6.
Commissioner Elton? I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Sorry. Okay, following up on Andy's scenarios. Is it the case that someone using the traditional or customary exception can do so an unlimited number of times?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you repeat that?
So when I get to the just cause and the emergency, one of the things under these new rules is in total, you can't use the just cause or emergency exception for more than 3 consecutive months or more than 20% of the meetings in a year. That is not the case for traditional teleconferencing. You could theoretically teleconference at all meetings if that was the policy of the commission, to allow teleconferencing just at any number of times.
Commissioner Engbarg, Commissioner Havenridge, you got comments, questions?
No comments for me.
Jeff answered most of my question about the traditional. The only other one that I had, but I don't want to get ahead of his presentation, had to do with keeping the Zoom option open for members of the public that wanted to attend the meeting or to provide comment to that. So,
is your question whether these rules apply to members of the public participating?
right, if they can, we can continue to have a Zoom option for people who want to participate in the meeting.
Right. The Brown Act rules apply only to members of the legislative body.
Right.
It's up to the commission to decide whether or not to continue to have hybrid meetings. The one point that I will make is that because of the way the new language is written, in order to be able to use the just cause or emergency exceptions, we need to anticipate that that might be used. And so my recommendation is that the agendas always have a way for the public to join remotely. The tricky part is you don't have to activate that unless someone is joining via just cause or emergency. So how exactly to put that on your agenda in a way that won't confuse the public, I'm not entirely sure how to do that. We can talk about it. The most obvious one is to say, in the event we have a commission member participating via just cause or emergency, we will activate this link. But this link will only be active in those circumstances. So otherwise, the meeting will be in person.
The other part of the question that I submitted had to do with members of the library staff, like if there was a meeting of the, let's say, Sebastopol lab or Cloverdale lab, and staff needed to attend, whether that attendance, since they're not members of the legislative branch, could just be done by Zoom.
Yes, staff meetings can be done in whatever method the library director deems to be appropriate.
Thank you.
Two separate categories of questions. Under the traditional teleconferencing that's known to most of us as a hybrid meeting, does the commission have to pass a policy allowing the commissioner to exercise the traditional teleconferencing, or does the commissioner have that inherent right without regard to a commission motion, the resolution allowing?
Right. Good question. The way the traditional teleconferencing rules are written, it is within the discretion of the agency whether to permit teleconferencing. And I use that term intentionally, the agency. It doesn't specifically say who within the agency, but the way I read the wording to say the commission could adopt a policy that says we're not going to allow teleconferencing. It could adopt a policy that said we are. You could not have a policy and deal with it on a case-by-case basis. You don't have to have a written policy, but it is, I think it is intended to say it is up to each agency or each legislative body actually to make a decision on how you want to implement the traditional teleconferencing rules.
Second kind of question. I honestly did read AB 2449. I used to just do this stuff for a living, and I wasn't thrilled with the legislature's work product here. But I remember that for the two narrow exemptions, just cause and emergency, there was a mention of a statement that had to be submitted of not more than 20 words. As far as you know, did each of these people submit such a statement, and who does the statement have to go to? For example, does the emergency one have to be read out on the floor of the commission?
No, I don't believe it has to be read in public. The law doesn't specify who it would go to. There's a couple of possibilities. One is particularly for the emergency exception. It is not unreasonable, certainly not unreasonable for commission members to ask, can I see the statement that was provided? Because I have to vote on whether to allow me to participate remotely. What I think is developing from 2 months of experience, or not even that because we're really just starting now, but what I'm hearing from other agencies is it is some combination of an honor system. Like, yes, you are required to submit something in writing, but we're not going to dig deeply into what that is. The other point is that the language in the Brown Act does clearly say they're not required to provide any confidential information, so they don't have to describe a medical condition, for example. They say, I have a physical emergency. They don't really have to provide you with the equivalent of a doctor's note that says, this is the condition that person is experiencing. Nor does it require that you get a doctor's note. You have a certain amount of discretion on the part of the agency to evaluate. And my suggestion, at least at the beginning of the process, is that we do sort of use an honor system and assume that you all understand you have a fiduciary duty as directors, and that you will honestly and honorably implement that, and you will not make use of exceptions unless there's a legitimate reason to do so. So if there are any other questions, I will jump on now to talking about the new just cause and emergency exceptions. So I mentioned that they can operate simultaneously, concurrently with traditional teleconferencing, so long as we have a majority of the legislative body in one location, and that location is open to the public. There are some common features to both the just cause and emergency exceptions, and those include that a quorum has to be in one location, that the public has to be allowed to participate by audio and video. It can be like this.
It could be a webcast format with a telephone, but it has to be both audio and visual participation allowed for the public when we're operating under just cause and emergency. And I would contrast that under the traditional rules, you don't have to allow public participation remotely when a member is participating remotely. The posted agenda has to describe how the public can participate remotely. Your agenda does, and I clarified with Erica, the phone number that's on your agenda, if someone calls that number, they will get a recording, which will tell them what the meeting ID is. Because I had a little bit of concern that what if someone called, the day of the meeting or the time of the meeting and said, I have an emergency, I want to participate remotely. How would members of the public know how to join? They would call that number and they may be told the meeting ID to log in. And then, as I mentioned, members cannot participate remotely for more than 3 months consecutively or more than 20% of regular meetings. And the members participating remotely have to be on camera for the entire time and audio, and have to disclose the presence of anyone 18 or over and a general statement of the relationship of the person in the room that's more than 18. Then there are some specific, well, we'll pause there. Anybody, any questions on those particular ones? Then specific to the just cause exception, the just causes that are identified by the legislature include caregiving needs, contagious illness, physical or mental disability, or travel on official business of the library or some other agency. Now, those are the 4 bases for just cause participation. And again, to contrast it with traditional, you don't have to have a reason why you want to participate remotely under traditional rules. You don't have to state a reason. You are required to notify the agency at the earliest possible time when you know. That can be up to the beginning of the meeting, essentially. And you have to provide a general description of what your just cause is. Doesn't have to exceed 20 words, doesn't have to include medical confidential information. And then there is no consent required by the legislative body. And as we found tonight, this is a great example. Thank you both for participating under each of the 2 rules so we can see the differences. So for the emergency participation, you needed an affirmative vote of a majority of the commission in order to participate. For just cause rules, you did not need a vote. And you are limited, the last one and probably most important one on just cause, you are limited to only 2 just cause remote participations in a calendar year. So that's 2 for just cause, and also no more than 3 consecutive just cause or emergency, and no more than 20%. And then specific to the emergency participation needs to be because of a physical or family medical emergency. That's the only basis for an emergency participation. Again, you have to notify the agency as soon as possible, provide a general description. You have to request permission to participate remotely, and there has to be an affirmative vote by a majority. And no, that doesn't have to be an item on the agenda. That is one of the 2 circumstances under which you can take action on an item that's not on the agenda. The other one is a longstanding one of adding an item for certain circumstances. So that is really all my prepared remarks. I'm happy to talk more about these particular topics or anything else in the Brown Act.
Just one question. Because of the weather we've been experiencing, do travel and unsafe road conditions fall under your?
That's a good question. They don't neatly fall under any of these reasons. The just cause, they wouldn't be emergency because it's not a medical emergency. So you'd be looking at for caregiving, contagious illness, physical or mental disability, or travel on official business. So I think my answer would be no. That would just be a time when you would not be able to participate. If the scenario of the road was washed out the day of the meeting, couldn't get to the meeting, you would just not be participating.
Which you could participate under the traditional.
Well, but under this example, we didn't know about it until the day of the meeting.
Oh, I see.
If you knew in advance, so because if you have roads washed out, you might be operating under an emergency, perhaps even the state governor declared emergency, and so you might conceivably be back operating under AB 361, although probably not for that. AB 361 was really focused on not holding meetings in order to protect the health and safety of the participants in the meeting, not so much for that sort of a situation, an emergency like that. Now, I will say that what used to come up occasionally is in a scenario like yours, could that person call into the meeting if there was a simultaneous telecom and listen to the meeting? And the answer is yes. You could listen. You would not be able to participate, however. So you could monitor it, but not speak.
Commissioner Engbarth has a hand raised.
Commissioner Engbarth.
Commissioner Engbarth?
Yes, hi. I had a question, Jeff, about the ADA and its application, interaction to this, the changes in the Brown Act legislation, that if, for example, we had a commissioner or a staff person who had a medical condition that qualified as one that could be accommodated or should be accommodated under the Americans with Disabilities Act, how that would interact with these provisions.
Yeah, good question. It raises a question which frankly I've never had raised before and never considered. The Brown Act for a long time now has a provision that says essentially that you need to respect the ADA, and if a member of the public, at least that was how it was always interpreted, had a disability that needed to be accommodated, that the expectation was the library would find a way to accommodate that. And under some set of circumstance, that could have meant perhaps remote participation. We typically saw it come up way more commonly in physical disabilities and making sure that your location was accessible, ADA accessible, not having a meeting that required someone to climb upstairs in order to get in, and those sorts of things. The way the new just cause exception is written, it brings in a cross-reference to that provision in the Brown Act, which I think does raise the possibility that the legislature has in mind that if you could accommodate someone's physical or mental disability that qualified as a disability under the ADA, that you would need to accommodate that, and the individual would not have to use the just cause exception. That might just be something that we would need to do. Now, in my view, so I think that's probably the correct answer. There's no law on it, and it wasn't described as part of the legislative process that I saw. So I don't know whether the legislature really thought through what they were saying there. What's important, though, is as with any request for accommodation, it needs to be a reasonable accommodation, and there needs to be a basis to say remote participation is the way I need to be accommodated, as opposed to some other method of accommodation. The one that folks have talked about in my office is with the lingering effects of a pandemic. If you have someone who is immunocompromised, for example, or going through chemotherapy or even some other reason why their immune system was suppressed, maybe that would be a basis to say remote participation would be the kind of accommodation that would be needed. I won't say I haven't thought it through, but I haven't had a real world example to actually wrestle with and figure out how that works. But yeah, that is a legitimate, and it is, just so that there's a question, while we typically think of ADA accommodation in the context of permanent disabilities or long-term disabilities, there are such things as temporary disabilities that are recognized under the ADA. So we could have a situation where that would be the case.
Thank you, Jeff. That's a good answer in the lack of the law being there for it. Thanks.
Under traditional, there aren't any limitations on how many times you can do it.
Correct.
So if a commissioner, for example, was willing to post an agenda every time at their house, if that's where they're meeting, they could conceivably always participate.
Yeah, I mean, and also their house would have to be open to the public to come in and join them in their house.
Does that mean the door's open?
No, this means you need to post an agenda, and if anybody knocks on the door, they're welcome to come in.
Right.
I've been thinking about this, and I was asking my colleagues, None of us collectively can remember many occasions when anyone used traditional teleconferencing at their house. It was typically when they were out of town at something or in a conference or some other thing. And I have to imagine that it was largely because people were not comfortable with listing their home address on the agenda and then making the door open to the public if they want to come in. But in theory, yes.
Erica.
So we have discussed the possibility of having branches serve as these remote locations. If the branch staff, if the meeting room was available and the technology was there, and it didn't have an adverse impact on our IT staff who has to kind of coordinate and make sure that everything's working properly.
So there has to be a quorum at some point.
Yes, there is.
Well, if we go back, under the traditional rules, there doesn't have to be a quorum anywhere. It just has to be a quorum within Sonoma County. So if you had the library commission split up at 3 different branches, that would be okay. The problem would be in that scenario, if somebody needed to join via just cause or emergency, probably wouldn't be able to because you would not have a majority of the commission at one physical location. But how likely is that scenario to play out? Probably not highly likely. Or you could arrange to have a quorum, a majority always at a single location and open up rotating 2 branches that open up occasionally, or however you want to do it.
Yes, just so you know, I participated in traditional teleconferencing in the fall of 2019 or early spring of 2020. I called in and I said, how do I do this? And I was told, post a notice on the front door. And I also posted a notice on our new library with the address and so on. So there's your example, and it worked fine.
And it's really, that's really a matter of personal choice, how comfortable you feel giving out your home address.
Perfect.
I think that's one of the questions, though, is if someone is compelled to be in their home, for example, for the meeting, then are they doing other things? Are they reaching out? Are they going to branches? Are they seeing what is happening in Sonoma County, the library? So it's something that I think we all have to ask, like whether we're providing the service that a commissioner needs to provide. Any other questions for our council? Well, thanks very much. I should ask, are there any public comments on the Brown Act?
Free legal advice. You get what you pay for, so.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you've got other questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to be glad to answer them. Why don't you funnel them through me or funnel them through Erica or Lisa, of course, and get them to him. All right, our next item are presentations, the library reports. And so do we have any public comments on the reports? Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I can hear myself. I hope you can hear me. So I do want to point out a few things in my report. I did include an update on our leases. And as you can see, we are still working on lease negotiations with the city of Santa Rosa. We just began our lease negotiations with the city of Healdsburg. And we do have 2 leases that are going to be expiring this year. The first one is the Rohnert Park Library Support Center lease that expires in September, and the Windsor lease expires in June. One caveat, though, about the Windsor lease, it is renewable, so we do have the option to extend the lease, but it is a year-to-year lease. So we might think about, as we approach that expiration date, working with the city to have a longer lease extension option. We're working with all of our partners on these Building Forward Together grants, and part of that grant condition is a lease that extends 10 years beyond completion of any infrastructure project. So we keep that in mind as we are working on our leases. The other thing I want to point out is in the library publicity report, you will see some stories about our career online high school. Our marketing staff and communication staff did a really fabulous job marketing this program, and they did a multi-pronged approach, and we saw 16 additional people fill out a survey for this program, and the state library has kind of extended the funding. So basically anyone who wants to participate in the Career Online High School program, we have the funding for, and so we're very happy to have these additional possible applicants in the program. So is there any questions about the management report?
Commissioner Engelbart has a hand raised. Commissioner Engelbart.
Yeah, I wanted to congratulate you and thank you, Erica, for the report on the lease negotiations. I think that was really, it was good to see that and see all the status of the leases in one place. So thanks to you and your staff for putting that together.
Oh, and the other thing I want to draw your attention to is our Women's History Month programs. We do have a celebrating trans women as one of our virtual events. And we have other Women's History Month programs, including some passive activities, book displays. We have a virtual events for adults called an author talk with Pam Jenoff, Lost Girls of Paris, and Code Talker. And then we have some creative bug programs for Women's History Month. So I wanted to call your attention to those. Those are coming up soon.
Any other comments, questions for Erica? Then, do we have any public comments on commission and liaison reports? See any hands up? Does any commissioners, do you have additional items for your own reports? Commissioner Parker.
Hi. I've had a long time to think about this. Right after a lot of soul searching and reckoning what's going on in my life, I've decided that this would be my last commission meeting. I'm resigning from the Library Commission.
If we don't accept your resignation.
I think it's been accepted by a couple of other people. It's been a terrific honor to serve with the commission, and I've just got some things happening with me personally that are just limiting my ability to really contribute. So I appreciate you all supporting and giving me this opportunity.
And we know that probably Craig is going to not let you get away. He's waving. We appreciate that. We'll be sad to see you go.
Thank you very much. It's been hard.
We hope you will spread the good word in Kentucky. That it's a wonderful thing to be on the library commission.
Absolutely, and I also want to say that I think Sonoma County Library is such a resource. It's a gem for Sonoma County, and serving in the capacity I did for the time I did gave me great pride. So thank you to all of you and to all of you.
Thank you.
May I ask Rachel a question? We will miss you, and thank you for your service, and I'll miss you at the library. Question, have you notified SNP Katati?
Sure, yes.
And do they know that they can appoint somebody from anywhere in the county?
They do. I spoke yesterday with one supervisor who would very much like to have a Katati resident to really articulate Katati needs. I don't know how broadly that's shared on the city council, but that was the vision, and I have to really say I could see the value of that.
We had a new city council liaison come to the lab meeting last week, and she's obviously very interested in the library and lots of brings a fresh viewpoint to things. So anyway, it is an opportunity for jurisdictions to look beyond their own borders. So I'll just
absolutely. Well, I came from outside Kentucky, so
you did?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other remarks on commission reports? Okay. Any changes in committee and liaison reports? Okay. Then we are down to item 8, Library Advisory Board appointments. Santa Rosa?
Yes, I have a motion to the packet.
Please.
I move by resolution of the Sonoma County Library Commission.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Cahill?
7.2.3, appointment of Jenny Meeker to Measure Y Oversight Committee.
Oh, I am so sorry. Thank you, I'm so sorry. So we appointed Jenny Meeker to the Measure Y Oversight Committee. You'd like to speak on that?
So it's my pleasure to appoint Jenny Meeker as my representative to the Measure Y Oversight Committee. Jenny is a longstanding member of the community. She's been a huge supporter of libraries and youth in our community. She has a love of library, and she also has a little free library outside of her house that she's very proud of that she built. So she looks forward to joining and supporting libraries in the school.
That's great. Is she with us tonight?
She's not.
Don't need to vote for that. I believe that's just a
Commissioners appoint I appoint my representative.
Correct, that's what I mean, so the commission does not have to.
This is just a report.
That's right. That's right, I was clarifying that for people who might be curious, because we have voted on them before and should know that. All right, now we're down to the, did you have something to say?
Just a question about that. We talked about this a little bit the last time. How full is our Measure Y? How many? No, Rachel will be leaving, so we'll have another opening. But
Well, Katati's Measure Y representative has stepped down already, so we've been casting it out. That's already been open.
okay. But we had some openings. I mean, we're the Measure Y committee. I'm just wondering how many people will see that.
We will have, by the next commission meeting, as many Measure Y oversight members as we have commissioners.
Is that 9?
9.
Okay. 9 members. Okay. Thank you.
6 down to 5. Our 6 for our meeting purposes, I'm down to 5.
Yes.
Yes. That's true, that's true. So what is a quorum when you have 10 commissioners?
It's fine.
All right, down to, let's see, library advisory board appointments, Santa Rosa.
Yes, as I was saying. I move by resolution of the Sonoma County Library Commission appoint Cynthia Dennis to an advisory position on the Santa Rosa Library Advisory Board for term ending June 30th of 2026.
I'll second that.
This commission for a long time. She's the longest serving member, and frankly, she's essential to the smooth functioning of the lab. So I move with the commission appoint her.
Do you have any public comments?
Yeah,
You moved and you seconded.
I second it.
All right. No public comments, then we will take the roll. Commissioner Haeuser.
Aye.
Commissioner Elkin.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Commissioner Matos.
Aye.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes.
Commissioner Cahill.
Yes.
Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
Commissioner Havenridge.
Yes.
Commissioner Ingvar.
Yes,
How many are you now?
enthusiastically.
Great. Well, then we will welcome her to the Library Advisory Board. All right. Public comment on the consent calendar.
Chair Doyle, there's the item number 9.
Did I miss another one? I don't believe we have anybody here from the Friends. Do we have anybody from the Friends, the foundations, the Library Advisory Board? That's my impression, sorry. Didn't share that. Back to the consent calendar. I didn't see any public comments on the consent calendar. Commissioners, do any of you wish to remove anything from the consent calendar? Okay. I have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I so move, or I'll second it.
Daniel and then Commissioner Engbar was a second. Your comments? Okay. Mr. Haeuser?
Aye.
Mr. Elton?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Commissioner Parker?
Aye.
Commissioner Cahill?
Yes.
Commissioner Vada?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Yes.
Commissioner Havenridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Engbar?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Can I ask a question? I didn't see that this was on the consent calendar, the correction to the library grant. I just had a question about that. And ask about item 10.3.
In terms of procedure, can you take a question on something that you've already approved?
I think you can take a question. Sure.
We have a question about the grant. And what's your question about?
My question was that on, let's see, page 22, a report on the foundation. Let's see, page 22, it mentions that about our fund development director participating in meetings to reallocate funding advocated by Assemblymember Levine and repurpose the funds for pre-planning expenses for the campaign. And that, I didn't know if that was all of the grant money or this thing we just approved on the consent calendar is about half the grant money. So I'm assuming we only received half of it, but I just had a question about whether we're talking about reallocating all of the grant that we eventually totally get or part of it.
I can answer that.
Okay.
So we can absolutely do that. We met with the state library, and when we initially submitted the grant, we were asking for money for FF&E. And when we discovered that they had issued the check to us incorrectly, and they're going to reissue the grant, we asked them, can we change the purpose of the funds? And they said, absolutely. So we will be asking for, when we redo the grant, we will be asking for the funds to be used for construction and pre-planning costs related to construction.
So we got 500,000. We're going to give that back. We're going to reapply for $1 million. And all of that will be about repurposing the funds for pre-planning.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. We have no actions by motion. That's unusual. Item 12, discussion. All right. So the first item under discussion is our draft library commission meeting scheduled for 2023-2024. So can you take a look at it? It's page 68. You will note that the time is TBD. Commissioner Engbar decided that, or suggested that that might be something that we wanted to talk about. He wasn't suggesting a change in it, but he wanted to open it up for comment. So, are there any other comments about the draft meeting schedule?
Only that I would love to meet earlier in the day if people are available. Because it gets pretty late for traveling back to Cloverdale. I don't know what your history is or whether it's always been 6, but if anyone's available earlier.
6 o'clock is a good time because it allows people who are working to attend a public meeting, and we also used a different government building before COVID, so we tended to be at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, my only, what I wanted to do would be to set up some time to give the commission members some time to look at, talk with their community members about what might be a time that we could, or any other ideas actually that we could use to increase the public participation at the meetings, whether we need to adjust the time on that, or whether there's something else that we could do, it seems like unless there's a hot issue, which might be an obvious thing, that the participation from the community is not really that active, and I'd like to just have the chance for us to talk with our respective community members and staff members and see whether a different time might increase the participation, or whether there's any other suggestions out there that might do that. Because I feel it's important that we have some ongoing community participation rather than just when there's a crisis or an emergency or a hot issue that comes up.
What's the real deadline for approving this new schedule?
Well, it's already March, and so
Yes.
we're looking at the next fiscal year, so.
So we could, in theory, approve it at the next meeting or the May meeting. I'm not sure what an alternative time would be, but if others do, I just wanted to think of maybe we could postpone this. I haven't got a suggestion as to.
Yeah, I mean, I would move that we adopt the draft with the understanding that we would maybe for a meeting or two work on exploring options with our respective communities, and then come back at some point and just talk about whether we might need to make a change. We may not want to, or might not need to make a change, but just to have the chance to explore the possibilities, since the COVID crisis is over and things are loosening up somewhat. We might have some other options out there that might be available that we should think about.
Well, since we brought this to discussion, Commissioner Carter?
I just wanted to point out that last year when former Commissioner Schneider and I looked at changing the day of our meetings from the first Monday of the month to the first Wednesday, that we also did look at other agencies within the county and their meeting schedules. And for the most part, public agencies within Sonoma County do meet in the evenings. I believe Santa Rosa has some daytime meetings. They also meet much more frequently. So just for broader consideration of what other agencies do.
My preference would be to keep it at the 6 p.m. hour. I appreciate the idea that it allows for working professionals to contribute. I know that you have an especially far drive to Cloverdale, so I do have some empathy for you in that regard. But I do think that if there are 2 openings now on the commission, you're going to be much more likely to get an individual who can participate when it is after work hours. And might also be able to diversify the commission itself.
Commissioner Haeuser.
Mostly small government agencies in the state of California meet in the evening. That's so they can attract people who are working during the day, and they can attract public attendees who work during the day. That's the general policy. It would be really convenient for me to meet in the afternoon. I'd love that. But I don't think that would be a good decision.
Could I have a motion for time, Commissioner Haeuser?
I move that we have our evening meetings at 6 p.m.
I second it.
Well, Chair Doyle, just,
It's not on the agenda.
yeah, it's not on the agenda. Yeah, so this is a discussion item.
Next
So
month.
we're not able to take action on it.
Thank you for the reminder.
However, at the next commission meeting, you know, we could bring back the draft agenda showing a start time of 6 p.m. That's an option.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up something else. I never have seen a commission recess before. And that made me kind of happy, actually. I mean, we've been meeting 12 times a year, every year I've been on here. Are there any downsides to having commission recess? And if we recess the commission, will we also recess our committees? And where did that idea come from?
Well, I mean, this is something that we talked about, and, you know, I'm trying to promote a healthier work-life balance among my library staff. And we all talked about having a commission recess that might be helpful for us to be able to, especially, you know, our finance staff, because end of year is June, and they're, you know, trying to get all of their reports done and their financial reports done. And having that recess would give us the opportunity to examine all of those year-end financials, so that when we do our annual report, we have everything, you know, together in there. It's also summer months, people have families, their children are out of school, people travel a lot. So, you know, picking a month where we think, you know, people might be able to take a vacation and not have to worry about working on a commission agenda item. So that was part of our thinking in putting in this recess.
So this came from the staff, and rather than us wanting to do it.
Well, if you want to take a break, then you should, you know.
No, I think it's an interesting idea. It's just if there's no downside to it, then, you know, if there's nothing we're gonna.
We're also probably going to have to add a board training somewhere along the way. We haven't gotten.
Well, that's on here, actually, Saturday the 23rd.
23rd of September.
I'm assuming that's us.
Correct, but I think there may be, I think these schedules are not absolutely cast in stone, but it's possible that we won't have a full commission by September. One hopes that we will, but.
Likely.
So can I just follow up with a comment? So if this is, you know, obviously to address yours and staff concerns, not having commission or committee meetings would also fall into that also, right? So we're talking about a break in finance and other. Okay.
Commissioner Haeuser.
A thought ran through my mind. Don't take this as something I support, but it was just a thought. We have trouble getting commissioners to commit to the grind. Maybe having fewer meetings would be better. I don't know. My wife would think it would be better. And ignore it. Just a thought.
Well, since we have to bring it back next month, we could also, I know people want to make vacation arrangements, etc. But if we, and I'm just trying to think about what happens in the year after, in September and October, that we would need to, there are no finance requirements that are going to come through then.
Well, we could
We could
propose
make it
instead
possible.
we could propose instead of August recess, July recess, typically ALA is at the end of June. That's another, and then, you know. But I think having a recess is a good thing. I know the commissioners often Zoom in, you know, from other locations. And I applaud your dedication to that. But if we had a recess, then we could go on vacation and not have to make those plans.
Do other water assistants in California have recesses?
They do. Usually it's around the holidays or, you know, so sometimes in December, and then sometimes we'll also at the end of the summer for the same reason, because of the summer vacations.
Any other things on this that we need to look at next time? Okay. Did I ask for public comment? Public comment on the possible library commission schedule. See none? We will bring it back next time. Okay. Our next item is library neutrality discussion. And let me remind you of how this came up. We started talking about, in January, we started talking about policies and whether we needed policies. A policy about what displays were put in the libraries by staff. Because we were talking about whether we had one, whether there were procedures, whether there were policies, and it turned into a rather robust conversation about more than policy. So one of the concepts that came up in the conversation was library neutrality. And so we decided that it would be a good idea to have a conversation about that. Library neutrality was mentioned as something that might be something to consider. And so Erica has put together some interesting information. You reviewed the packets at the American Library Association midwinter. There were lots of conversations about equity, about diversity, about inclusion, because elsewhere in the country there are conversations that are happening that aren't happening in California yet, about book banning, about materials that are being taken from the shelves, both in school libraries and public libraries, and so the notion of neutrality is something that libraries all over the country have been talking about for years, and so we were reminded that as long ago as 6 years, there was a huge conversation presented at an American Library Association conference, and various people in various positions, academic librarians, leaders of major libraries, talked about whether neutrality was a good thing, and the broad range of conversation really came down to active neutrality is something that many of the people talked about, making sure that we look for material that is that perhaps over the years has not been available to everyone, and those are the kind of things that should be on library shelves, that should be in library databases, so that people who have been underserved for so very long, for whatever reason it is, whether it's race, whether it's age, whether it's sexual gender, identity, whatever it is, have not been seen to. And so that conversation really, having been 8 years ago, libraries have really progressed, and most around the country are very actively engaged in making sure that kind of process, that kind of commitment is being made in their libraries. And so, but I think Erica would like to start off the discussion a little bit and just talk about Sonoma County Library as a specific example.
Well, as you read in my background report, the library has taken a stance on several issues, not only in our reimagining plan, where one of our goals is working towards becoming an anti-racist organization. We've also taken stances on intellectual freedom. We have a statement of inclusivity, and protecting patron privacy in the wake of 9/11 and the Patriot Act. So to say that the library should never take a stance is not only untrue, it's factually untrue, we have taken stances, but it ignores all of the other, the kind of socio-historical context in which libraries are situated. And as you read in some of the articles, you know, libraries have not always been neutral, and this I don't want to say it's a myth, but it is definitely a fallacy. You know, when you look at even up to the 1960s, libraries were segregated, and so, you know, I think that our stance has been, you know, in the library that this is a you know, that we are working towards serving those underserved populations, and that this is a social justice issue from our perspective. And we recognize that members of the community see this as a political issue. But from our perspective, everything can be political. And shying away from controversy is not going to advance our racial equity goals. That there are times, when we have to take a stand. And this is one of them. So, you know, that's kind of where we are, and I reaffirm my position that, you know, this is an internal operational decision, and that the logistics and the complexities of creating a policy would be extremely difficult to do, and brings up all kinds of issues, such as, you know, I work for a library system where every flyer that we created had to be approved by an administrator. And you can imagine how much work that generates for those administrators. I don't think we want to put ourselves in a position where that is what we are saying we are going to do. It also, you know, we have professional staff who we hire and we train, and, you know, they are, they go to library school and they learn about intellectual freedom. And, you know, we trust them to make the decisions for their communities that they think, you know, are best. And that's, you know, I think that this is where we as a library staff stand. And, you know, as I said in the January meeting, we can, you know, we do as the Library Commission directs us, but we really believe that this is an operational choice.
One of the things we have to remember is that we spent a lot of time doing a reimagining plan. That first we did the strategic plan, that then moved into the reimagining plan, and we talked to a lot of the people in the community, and so our priorities really include trying to make sure that the staff and the programming is diverse and is actively moving in that direction, so that we can, so that we're not just providing services the way that we have always done in the past. That we are actively reaching out to people who have been underserved, and which then leads us back to neutrality, because it isn't really neutral. And the concept of neutrality for the library is really a concept that we have, in fact, for the most part, left behind. The house, you know, the horse has left the barn. But we want to make sure that we get your thoughts, and we also, before we open it up for community or commission comments, we should take public comment as well. So if you have thoughts about about a policy, then this is about a policy. We were talking about neutrality, not a policy about it. We were talking about neutrality, the concept of neutrality in your public library. If you've got thoughts about that, we'd love to hear them. And you have 3 minutes each, if you like. Let's step up to the microphone. No pressure.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Kernick again. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the chair of Positive Images. I have a lot of thoughts about this, and probably I'll try to fit what I can into 3 minutes. Some of it I think is already things that I've shared. Libraries are not neutral places in my mind, and they should not be. Let me actually start by sharing a quote from Dr. D.L. Stewart, who is a professor of education. This is from an essay called The Language of Appeasement, Diversity and Inclusion versus Justice and Equity. Stewart says, diversity asks who is in the room. Justice responds, who is trying to get in the room but can't, whose presence in the room is under constant threat of erasure. Inclusion asks, is this environment safe for everyone to feel like they belong? Justice responds, whose safety is being sacrificed and minimized to allow others to be comfortable maintaining dehumanizing views. The Sonoma County Library is doing important work to create a just, equitable, and safe environment for anyone in Sonoma County to visit. That work doesn't and shouldn't look neutral because it takes thoughtful work to ensure that marginalized people feel welcome and safe in the library. Black people and LGBTQIA people comprise groups for whom public spaces, including libraries, have not always been welcoming, equitable spaces. Public libraries were segregated in many states until the late 1950s and early 1960s. Black people were denied access and denied library cards. The American Library Association was founded in 1876 on values of equity and democracy, but those values did not extend to everyone. And it took a Black librarian, E.J. Josie, to draft a resolution that forced the ALA to disallow Southern state library chapters from denying membership to Black librarians. In a New York Times opinion piece about a year ago, Stanley Kurtz tried to argue that libraries espouse woke orthodoxy and need to be instead neutral. And he talked about human beings enjoying equal rights. But in a powerful response by Publisher Weekly, library educators of color observed that the grounds for this neutrality was based in values held at the founding of America that did not extend those equal rights to all individuals. It was only for free individuals. Pride flags signal a welcome to me and to my community, and the idea that it signals that the space is trying to be a safe and welcoming space. Not that it necessarily will be, but that it's trying to be. And I'm looking at a commission of no Black commissioners, considering whether it's okay to, considering the weighing in on the value of a Black Lives Matter flag, when I don't think that's something that they have the lived experience to feel fully.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, commissioners, your thoughts?
Yeah, I asked to be appointed to the commission of the Santa Rosa City Council because I was appalled at the poverty in one or two spots in Santa Rosa. And I still feel that libraries are engines of social and economic uplift. That's the principal job, one of the principal jobs. And you can't be uplifted if you don't feel safe or welcome. So my issue would be, does our present policy allow the staff to figure out what to do, what to post from inside their own staff? I support our present policies. I think they will find job guidance for the staff. So I don't support any change in our policies or in our operations.
Commissioner Engelbarth, does that?
Fred, you're on mute.
Muted.
Thank Erica and her team for putting the report together. I feel that that's we're making a good start to having a conversation about this. I'd like personally the opportunity to review this material with my lab and other people in the community, and then provide a response for a follow-up to this, which I think we might want to keep on the agenda for a while, just to have more discussion about where we are with it. Because I know that the American Library Association has gone through, as Deborah has pointed out, and as Erica pointed out, many years of considering making this transition from the concept of neutrality to something else, and that they've developed some position statements on that have not been yet submitted to the ALA for approval, of what they think might be a good alternatives to the concept of neutrality. And I'd like to explore those. I think having some training on this would be helpful. I think getting the context of what we're talking about from our legal counsel in maybe a training session, or as part of a training session, to talk about just what the legal issues are that might be involved with this would be helpful. I think one that would be of some value would be to clarify the difference between what is operational policy versus operational procedure versus what is part of our role as a governance entity in terms of creating policy. It's my understanding as a governing body that we establish policy, and that the library administration is responsible for developing the operational aspect of that. And that we certainly consult with the staff and administration for policy suggestions, but that, I think, the ultimate decision and responsibility is on us as a commission to decide where we want to go. But it certainly, since the ALA is still wrestling with this, I'd like to see something where we have the benefits of their work, and that also we have an opportunity to see what our community might have to say, and that we have an opportunity to talk about this among ourselves some more before we leap to a conclusion.
I'm struggling a bit with how to articulate this, so perhaps, Erica, perhaps you'll be able to help me. And I think I'm reacting, Fred, to the use of the term policy. I feel like as a commission, we have endorsed the reimagining plan, and we continue to support the mission, the vision, and the values that the library has articulated. That feels to me like enough, and that the actual putting into effect of the reimagining plan in line with our mission, vision, and values is the role of staff. I feel like trying to articulate a policy that would sit somehow in between those two is not a viable task, and not a valuable one either.
I agree with you, Commissioner Elkind. I feel like a further conversation about a policy is not only outside the scope of the work of the commission, but it also perpetuates the systems of oppression. And this is where the rubber meets the road. We have our statements, we have our reimagining plan, we have all of these items that we have agreed to. And when there is conflict and challenge, when it's time to take action, we want to hide behind more discussion and more policies, because it's hard for us to make a decision and move forward and make change and to say we actually do believe we're going to do the work that we have said we will do in our statements, in our plans, in our mission and our vision and our values. So I'm really struggling with the idea that we're going to continue this conversation, because what we're really just doing is saying to all of these communities who feel marginalized and who are marginalized and who are oppressed in our community, you don't matter yet. You aren't important yet. We need to discuss it here as this body who looks very much alike, who comes from very similar backgrounds, who are all very similar in the same way. And I have to be honest with you, it is very uncomfortable to be receiving these emails and these comments from our community, and to know that we are still going to continue to have this discussion rather than just say, no, actually, we are not going to continue it because we are doing the right thing, we are taking the steps, and we are doing the action and the hard work. And that may make people uncomfortable, and that is okay. It is okay for people to be uncomfortable with it, and that is our responsibility to lead the way, not to wait for someone else like the ALA to make a decision, but to say, no, we're going to be at the front of this in supporting our marginalized communities. So I don't agree with the idea of having more discussion. I do not agree at all about seeing a policy brought forward, and I would really like to table this discussion today and move forward.
May I make another comment?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, we have a person who's spoken twice, and it's my poor hearing and the poor acoustics that do not enable me to reference you by name. But I appreciated what you said about the fact that seeing pride signs makes you feel that we want to welcome you, even if there's no guarantee that when you get there, you'll actually experience it, but that they're signaling to you that we see you, we care about you, and we want to welcome you. Similarly, I saw in some of the emails that there were folks from the African American community who were responding positively to Black Lives Matter signs in a similar way. I think that's great. Personally, I have a great deal of difficulty, or I would have difficulty, if somebody who does not identify as LGBTQIA saying, gee, the fact that you're welcoming those people makes me uncomfortable, or the fact that you have a Black Lives Matter sign and you're welcoming African American people makes me feel comfortable, or the fact that you have your signs in Spanish and in English makes me feel uncomfortable because I don't speak Spanish. I really don't care. I think we need to, if we are truly for everyone, we need to put out that welcome sign as best we can. And if there are people who are offended by that, I'm sorry.
I'm agreeing with Andy and Sarah. And I first actually want to say, wow, what an amazing document. I've learned a lot about these discussions, reading 54 pages, and I appreciate getting these voices through the report, so thank you. I think that Sarah put her finger on something that I thought of with flying the banners is a start. We've had a situation with this library not that long ago with a bit of insensitivity to particularly Black issues related to public service, police. So I think that we need to go further with our training, and in two regards. One is continuing awareness of the marginalized communities and of their needs. And the second is really engaging the people that are finding it offensive, to explain to them that it's not a zero-sum game, that they can come to the library too. There will be banners that say Black Lives Matter because it haven't always been the case that Black people can come into the library and feel welcome, that gay people can come into the library and feel welcome, to see materials on the shelves that speak to them. But it doesn't mean that we're going out and taking off all of the other books that are on the shelves. And I think that somehow we can find training to help communicate that message to our entire community and not try to leave anybody out.
I'm new here, but I see all the effort that you have put in your management plan and in finding Erica and choosing our branch managers. And to me, in addition to what everyone else has said, it's a sign of respect to our fine staff to follow their lead on this. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you for stepping in. Commissioner Heavenridge? No? Commissioner Engbarth?
Yes, just to be clear, I today, I'm not feeling like we're talking, at least I'm not talking about any particular policy. I think what we're talking about is much like what you have when you go to the ophthalmologist and you're having your eyes tested and trying to find out which lens is clearer. We have the social justice lens in place. I'm not sure that we have the lens in place that the efforts of our colleagues in the library profession, the other trustees, other boards, the American Library Association itself has developed. Was the raw report from the commission, or from the ALA meeting was included in Erica's report, but not any discussion of the options that they're considering to be clearer about the fact that libraries are not neutral. I agree with the concept of neutrality. Not only has changed within the library system, it's changed within the courts, and it's changed internationally, that people are moving away from the concept of neutrality more towards a position of saying yes, that there needs to be, people need to be taking stands on things. I happen to believe that building that up from the community is helpful, but I also feel that there's a framework that we have to work with, and that we are not a private library, we're a public library. Therefore, we're in a position where we have to work within the confines and the limits of the Constitution. And there are parts of the library we could decide to keep open completely. We can have anybody come up and do anything that they want to, as far in terms of posting, as long as there's a time, place, and manner consideration, and content isn't being used to justify allowing them or not justifying them. There's parts of the library, just as there would be in a courthouse, where that type of broad perspective isn't really appropriate, because what we're trying to do is represent everybody. And there are people out there that have different points of view. And an example would be certainly having a demonstration of a hate group out in front of the library building is one thing. Having that same demonstration happen within the library building itself, where we're conducting our business, is another thing. And if we're acting as a government agency, when we open up the door for one organization or another organization to have free speech and let's say the main part of the library, we're opening that up for everyone else because we are in a sticky spot of not being able to say, hey, we're going to use content. We're going to allow anti-hate content in the library, but we're not going to allow any content that might be hateful. I think that we need to wrestle with that ahead of time so that we avoid having a problem down the line that would end up putting us in a position where we'd have to use Jeff's services to protect us and bail us out of it. But I also think that we shouldn't be operating in a manner that's inconsistent from what the professional organization is. That's really where I'm at. And I'm not taking a stand on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Engelbart.
We're fine here.
We're actually closing, we're not.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear.
Do you want Commissioner Engelbart to repeat the last sentence?
I'm sorry, did you say that
Please.
again?
Fred, I'm sorry, we couldn't hear the last thing you said because there was an announcement that was being piped into the room. Could you repeat the last 2 or 3 sentences?
I was just saying at the end that I today, I'm not in a place where I'm saying we should have what the policy might be that we may or may not have, and if we're going to have a policy, I'm saying that what we want to do, what I would want to do, is have a full picture of what elements, what we need to be thinking about as far as if we do decide to craft a policy and crafting it, what the legal limits might be, since we are a state public library, what our concerns might be in that regard, and then what the profession, the library profession itself, is holding out as a standard or a replacement. I mean, putting it into their ethics statements or putting it into their competency statements. Because I think that if, for example, they go in the direction that they're talking about right now, the committee that's been working on this, as far as adopting radical empathy as the ALA's position on what to do.
Commissioner Engelbart, I'm going to stop you right there. We've been talking about this a fair amount, and I think that we can have a longer conversation about this. But
I agree.
For tonight's purpose, why don't we let me summarize here. Commissioner Cahill, there actually is no policy. And all right, Commissioner McKenzie.
I think Tom had his hand up, and I did too. We haven't had a chance to talk.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Let me just first of all say that it's extremely easy to be misunderstood and misinterpreted and misquoted on this topic. And I was a person who asked this question originally, and I asked it back when we passed, when a Black Lives Matter resolution was passed a year ago. And I asked, and tied to that was a plan to put banners out in front of all the libraries. Those two things were tied together. And at that time, the commission separated those things, voted on the resolution, but did not discuss a policy. And the policy, I know people hate the word policy, guidelines, whatever it was, but
we're not talking about policy right now.
Well, okay. I appreciate just a chance to just clarify the situation. So this question that I asked was, how big are these banners going to be? How long are they going to be up? And who gets to decide what issues are supported on banners by the library? That was my original question. It was never answered. And so I brought up a couple more times. We're going to talk about that. And that's where this topic, or at least the category of policy came up. I just want to make it abundantly clear for at least the third or fourth time that I am not, and I have never talked about having limitations or policy or anything on any displays that have ever been in our libraries, Black History Month, like any of our programming, any of that, nothing. My simple question was, when the library administrator at that time, Ann Hammond issued a Black Lives Matter campaign email and ordered these signs and had them sent out to all the branches, and they got put up. And I went into, for example, the Sonoma Valley Library, and it was hanging from the rafters, the only poster in there. I'm just wondering, how long? I understand outreach, I understand representation, I understand diversity, inclusion, and we make a lot of effort, and we've done a lot of work on that. I've never criticized any of that or anything like that. But I have asked the question, how long are the Black Lives Matter banners, for example, going to be up? They've been up for a year. I'm just asking the question. And so this gets blurred into, we either didn't discuss it or now we've opened it up into this whole issue of library neutrality. I really appreciate all these materials. It's very interesting. It's very helpful to me to realize how broad this issue is, how undecided actually it is also. One of the articles in here refers to the fact that, hey, ALA really needs to define neutrality. They haven't stepped up. I mean, that's one of the gist of what I got out of this article. So it's to me, it's not an issue that we just say, oh, well, we're just done with it. We get neutrality. And there's just a lot to it. And so again, from my rather simple question, which we haven't answered, to this broader issue of neutrality, which, we are the governing body of an independent public agency. Whatever our personal feelings are, of course, we're going to have, our personal feelings. I mean, we operate based on our judgments and our beliefs, and we do the best we can. But we do have to think about in terms of other public agencies, universities, city halls, whatever. I mean, how do public agencies react when, or how do they handle these very legitimate questions? And so, again, I appreciate the information. I've gotten through almost all of it. It's very dense. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to consider. There's a lot of sides to it. People with a lot of knowledge, a lot more experience than I have spent incredible amounts of time studying these issues. And so I appreciate, let's put it to bed and let's be done with it. But I also appreciate, let's not say we're completely done talking about it, because to me there's complexity involved. There's an individual issue and there's complexity of the overall issue of neutrality. So that's my two bits.
Mr. Haeuser. Reading all this material leads me to believe that neutrality is not something we can define very easily. And thinking about it, I think the neutrality that everybody I've known dealing with the Sonoma County Library agrees with is we need to provide materials, books, materials, whatever, on all topics that are of interest to any of our population. And I don't think anybody's questioned that. Now, that's a policy. And I do want to say I disagree that policy should be made by the staff. The staff can recommend, but the buck stops at this commission. We're responsible. If there's a riot, it's our responsibility. If there isn't, if people get mad at us, it's our responsibility. Having said that, I think we do need to consider at some time what we can have in our branches. Because I understand that people consider a banner that says white lives matter is incendiary and racist. Well, I am concerned because we're talking about blacks, we're talking about whites. We don't talk about the Asians who were interned. I had a roommate who was born at Dooley Lake internment camp during World War II. The Asian population that are experiencing discrimination by schools because they're too smart. So there are a lot of things out there that are very, very difficult in our society. But I think we have agreed that we have to provide materials for any interest that is expressed by our population. And I don't think we're ever going to define neutrality. But we do have to be careful how we approach things. And I want to say I disagree 100% with the staff is responsible. We have to take that responsibility.
Actually, Commissioner Heavenridge, we haven't heard from you. You don't have to speak, but
I'm finding this very interesting, but I have nothing to say right now. Thank you.
okay. Commissioner Cahill.
We have a variety of policies. Various statements we've issued, these are policy. They govern the staff, the whole institution. We don't have.
Excuse me, Dave. Can you just hold up for 1 sec while they make the announcement so I can hear you?
Okay. We have the statements of inclusivity. We have the reimagining plan. These are policies. We don't have anything that's written down stating, and furthermore, no banner may be up for a year or more. That would be a policy. We could do that if we wanted to. It would be wrong. And so without any bright lines on how long banners can be up, it becomes an operational issue. So if someone wants to know how long can the banners be up, the answer is ask the staff, and thank you for your support. And that should end the matter.
We passed a policy not so long ago that talked about the material that external organizations can bring in. We don't have, and we do not have a policy that talks about the internals. You know, clearly we've had this robust conversation. I think probably the majority of us believe that that if there's going to be, that there need to be procedures. I think that somewhere along the line there have to be procedures, whether it's our reimagining plan. You know, how does that go out to the branches? How do the branches decide that sort of thing? It may not be a policy, but perhaps we could recommend. And I think we're all supportive of what the Sonoma County Library and staff is doing. And truly, we want to make sure that we are welcoming and inclusive. And if you know people of color who would be interested in sitting in a commission spot, there are 2 commission spots open, and we would welcome diverse candidates. We have been saying that for years. So that said, we do need to have some rules, and so perhaps we could recommend to the staff that they go back and they think about this conversation that we're having, and they perhaps they make a recommendation. Do we need a policy? If we don't need a policy, do we at least need procedures? Because you know, the tenor of library conversations are only going to get stranger as the years go by, and we want to make sure that we are standing with the people that we represent. We serve the people of Sonoma County, and so we want to make sure that we're listening and that we put, I don't want to say policies, but that we would provide some clarity. And so I know it's a tough task, but we're going to ask the staff, help us get to clarity. And we don't expect it in the April meeting. We don't expect it in the May meeting. But we also know that these conversations are going to go on in our communities, and it is our responsibility as commissioners to listen to that. It's our responsibility to say, this is what we think the library is doing. And so if we can go out with staff and with other commissioners and say, you know, we're here for you, I think that we need to be going out to listen. And then that can also provide input for whatever comes forth. And I think Commissioner Engbarth is absolutely correct. We do need to tell people that we're talking about this, but no one is trying to rip the banners down. No one is trying to not provide support. But as a, you know, as an internal policy, if you put something up, how long does it stay up? I mean, it's a legitimate question. Or if there are ways that we want to support diverse communities, then is there a Sonoma County Library banner we can put up that that supports all those diverse communities? Barbara, you have any of that? No, I'm sorry, Sarah, you have any of that?
I think one of the concerns that I have in listening to these comments is the context is from our own privilege. So we are looking at this as the ones who are traditionally accepted into the library space. We walk in and there is no question that we are accepted into that space. And I feel really concerned that there's an idea that there would be a time period in which it's accepted to have the message being that human rights matter, that Black Lives Matter, and they're welcomed in just this year, in a year. For a year, they're welcomed into the space, or our gay community is welcomed in for 6 months, because that's what we decided. So I feel very concerned that we're looking at this from a very specific lens that isn't social justice, but our own privilege. And maybe that's more of the work that the commission needs to do, because I've heard conversations about how we've been seeking diverse candidates on the commission and yet haven't gotten one for years. And so that begs the question, we have a very actually diverse community, so what are we doing wrong as the commission not to welcome these people to a role on the commission? So maybe it's time for us to take a look at the work that we are doing and the values that we have and the way in which we are moving through the world that says, how is my privilege impacting this library that is supposed to be uplifting communities? How is my privilege preventing others from coming to the table who have a diverse opinion that I do? And so maybe the work isn't about library neutrality, but our own privilege and what we are doing to welcome or not welcome people to the table.
Probably both. Probably both. All right. Last questions, last comments? Thank you very much. And thank you, Erica, for putting all the information together. We appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody who's here to listen. And with that, we are going to go into closed session.